Welcome to the debate.
It's good to be here.
We are living through a strange, maybe unprecedented moment in economic history. If you open your phone right now, just scroll through TikTok or Instagram Reels, you will find a landscape that, well, the only way I can describe it is the Wild West of finance. You have 17-year-olds giving million-dollar advice to millions of adults. You have algorithms that, they prioritize engagement over accuracy. And you have a whole generation of investors whose primary source of financial literacy is a 60-second clip set to some trending audio.
It's definitely a phenomenon. I mean, we're seeing the democratization of financial advice on a scale that was just unimaginable 20 years ago. But with that democratization comes a significant amount of noise and, frankly, a lot of systematic risk.
That is the exact tension we need to explore today. The central question isn't just about whether these specific tips work. I mean, some do, some don't, but what this whole ecosystem represents. Does the rise of viral financial advice represent a genuine breakthrough in access to financial literacy, or is it a contagion of misinformation that, threatens the long-term wealth of a generation?
It's a critical distinction. And I suspect, just based on your opening, that you view this largely as a contagion.
I do. I believe that viral financial advice, as it currently stands, is largely dangerous. My position is that falsehoods just spread faster than truth on these platforms. And when you strip away the safeguards of traditional evidence-based economic structures like 401ks and diversified risk management, you aren't liberating people. You're exposing them to ruin. We're seeing these complex economic realities just distilled into sound bites that are fundamentally misleading.
I understand that perspective, and I don't disagree that the math is often flawed. I really don't. However, I view it through a different lens. I would argue that while the arithmetic of these viral hacks is often suspect, the behavioral psychology behind them addresses human needs that traditional finance completely ignores. Things like cash stuffing or these gamified savings challenges, they serve as a necessary, if imperfect, entry point to literacy for people who've been alienated by the ivory tower of traditional economics. The Wild West exists because the established city wasn't letting people in.
Okay, let's get into that, because imperfect is a very charitable description for advice that loses people money. I want to start with the mechanism of how this information travels. There's a study from the Stanford Graduate School of Business, I think it was published in 2023, that I find absolutely chilling. It found that falsehoods are 70% more likely to be retweeted than the truth.
That is a staggering statistic, though, perhaps not entirely surprising given human nature. We like stories, not spreadsheets.
Perhaps not surprising, but devastating in a financial context. When you apply that viral coefficient to financial advice, you create an environment where the most outrageous claims rise to the top. Social media algorithms they're designed to magnify engagement, not competence. So we end up in this world where confidence completely replaces competence. When a creator looks into the camera and says, "Skip your 401k, it's a scam," that content just flies because it's contrarian and it's shocking.
It disrupts the narrative.
Exactly. But it's not just a difference of opinion. It is objectively harmful. It causes listeners to leave free money, the employer match, and significant tax advantages on the table. Financial health, real financial health, requires adherence to peer-reviewed economic research and data from institutions like the Federal Reserve, not get-rich-quick schemes that just happen to trend. When accuracy is penalized by the algorithm, truth becomes a liability.
You're focused on the supply side, the creators, the algorithms. But have you considered why that falsehood travels so far? It's not just the algorithm, it's the audience. I acknowledge the danger of scams, obviously, but we have to look deeper at why this content goes viral in the first place. It offers simplicity and certainty in a world that feels incredibly complex. Traditional advice, that, boring 40-year plan of low-fee index funds, it often fails to engage the average person because it feels disempowering. It feels so slow.
Slow is how wealth is built. There are no shortcuts to compounding.
Mathematically, yes, of course. But psychologically, people crave agency. Viral trends offer that.
I'd posit that some of these hacks, even if they are mathematically suboptimal, serve as powerful behavioral tools. Dismissing these trends entirely ignores the psychological barriers people face with money. I mean, when we talk about things like the tangible pain of spending cash versus swiping a card, we're talking about human behavior, not just spreadsheets. And if the traditional finance world refuses to meet people where they are, we can't be surprised when they turn to some charismatic teenager on TikTok who promises them a way out.
But that way out is so often a trapdoor. Let's move to the core of this, specifically looking at some of the most pervasive myths. I want to start with the one I mentioned earlier, the get-rich fallacy regarding retirement accounts. There is a prevalent narrative on TikTok that 401ks are scams and that young people should put their money into crypto instead.
Oh yeah, I've seen those clips. They usually involve a luxury car, maybe a shot of a beach in Dubai, and a very, very confident assertion that the stock market is rigged against the little guy.
Precisely. And I really need to dismantle this. A 401k is not just an investment you can swap out for another. It is a tax-advantaged vehicle. The money goes in pre-tax, which reduces your taxable income immediately. Furthermore, there's Fidelity data that shows the average 401k balance for long-term savers, we're talking people in the system for 15 plus years, is over $500,000. That is real, tangible wealth built on the back of compound interest. And, crucially, employer matching.
The employer match. That's essentially a 100% return on investment right out of the gate. That's hard to beat.
It is impossible to beat. It is a guaranteed 100% return on the first few percent of your income. To suggest trading that for cryptocurrency it's financial malpractice. We're talking about placing all your eggs in a hyper-volatile basket. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, they released a report highlighting a massive surge in crypto investment scams on social media. When you tell a 22-year-old to forego a tax shelter for a speculative asset, you are not giving them advice, you are gambling with their future.
I'll grant you the volatility argument. Replacing a primary retirement vehicle with crypto is, like you said, like replacing a balanced diet with energy drinks. It's exciting, but it's just not sustainable. However, I do want to challenge your defense of the set it and forget it mentality.
Why challenge it? It works. The historical data is irrefuted.
Because for a young investor today, set it and forget it feels like a loss of control. The viral advice, it appeals to a desire for speed and agency. They see a world where housing prices are skyrocketing and their wages feel stagnant. A 7% annual return doesn't feel like it will ever let them catch up to the cost of living. So while the advice to dump the 401k is mathematically wrong, the impulse to find a vehicle that might actually change their life in the short term, that's understandable. The problem isn't just the scam, it's that the traditional promise feels broken to them. They feel the game is rigged, so they go looking for a different game.
I see your point, but that feeling of brokenness, while valid, is being exploited. The solution offered is predatory. These creators weaponize that despair to sell snake oil. They aren't fixing a broken system, they're exploiting the victims of it. But let's pivot to a trend that's less about speculation and more about daily management, where your psychology argument might hold more water. Cash stuffing.
The envelope method. Yeah, this has exploded in popularity recently.
It is everywhere. For those listening who might not be scrolling these feeds, this is the practice of withdrawing your entire paycheck in cash and stuffing it into different envelopes labeled for expenses. Groceries, rent, gas, no banks, no digital transactions.
And aesthetically, it's very pleasing to watch. I'll give it that. It makes budgeting look organized and tangible. You see this stack of bills decrease as you fill the envelopes.
It may be pleasing, but it is financially illiterate. When you rely on cash stuffing, you are incurring a massive opportunity cost. We're currently in an environment where high-yield savings accounts, HYSAs, are offering 4 to 5% interest. If you have $10,000 sitting in envelopes in your sock drawer, you are losing $400 to $500 a year in risk-free interest. That is just bad math, period. Plus, you have the physical risk, theft, fire, loss, and you aren't building credit.
Okay, but you are focusing entirely on the arithmetic, and you're ignoring the behavior. Have you considered the University of Minnesota study regarding the pain of paying?
I'm familiar with the concept that parting with physical cash hurts more than swiping a card, but does that little psychological twinge really outweigh 5% compound interest?
For some people, absolutely. The study found that people feel significantly more psychological pain when parting with physical cash. That friction curbs impulse buys. We have to be honest. For a person in a severe spending crisis, someone who cannot stop swiping their credit card, the mathematical loss of $400 in interest is frankly irrelevant if it saves them $2,000 in impulse spending.
But it's a regression. It's moving backward from modern financial tools. We shouldn't be encouraging people to unbank themselves.
It's not a lifestyle, it's a tourniquet. You don't wear a tourniquet forever, but you use it to stop the bleeding. I view cash stuffing as a valid budgeting exercise to reset habits. The viral nature of it suggests that people are desperate for a tangible relationship with their money because the digital world makes spending too easy. So, while I agree it shouldn't be a permanent system, just dismissing it as illiterate misses the point. It's a behavioral hack.
I'm just not convinced because on TikTok, it is rarely presented as a temporary tourniquet. It's presented as a superior lifestyle. And speaking of lifestyle choices that court disaster, we have to talk about the trend of using credit cards as emergency funds. This is where I struggle to find any justification, psychological or otherwise.
This is certainly the most contentious area, yeah.
Contentious is too light a word. It's horrifying. There's a viral thread of advice suggesting that because inflation erodes the value of cash, you shouldn't keep an emergency fund in a savings account. Instead, you should rely on 0% APR credit cards to handle emergencies so your cash can stay invested in the market.
The logic being that cash drags down your portfolio's overall performance.
Exactly. But this fundamentally misunderstands what an emergency fund is for. It is not for growth. It is for liquidity and risk mitigation. A 2021 Federal Reserve report found that 36% of Americans could not cover a $400 emergency with cash. If you tell those people to rely on credit, you are setting them up for a debt spiral.
I agree that for the vast majority, it is catastrophic advice.
It is worse than catastrophic because of the fine print. Those 0% APR rates are introductory. If you can't pay off the balance before the ends, which is likely since it was an emergency and you clearly didn't have a cash, you are often hit with deferred interest. You could be looking at a 25% APR applied retroactively to the original purchase date. It's a trap.
I don't dispute the mechanics of the debt trap at all. However, I do want to point out that this advice cleverly weaponizes a valid fear. Inflation does erode cash value. That is a fact.
But that erosion is the price of insurance. You pay premiums for car insurance hoping you never have to use it. You lose a little purchasing power on cash hoping you never need it in an emergency.
Correct, but nobody explains it that way. Traditional education fails to explain the difference between liquidity and investment. So when some creator comes along and says, stop losing money to inflation, it sounds like a revelation. It's like removing the airbags from your car to save weight. Yes, the car will go faster and be more fuel efficient. That is technically true. But if you crash, you die. The viral advice focuses on the speed of the car. It never once mentions the crash.
That is a perfect analogy. It maximizes efficiency at the cost of survival. And this whole theme of efficiency leads us to the final category of misinformation I want to touch on, the mirage of passive income.
Make money while you sleep. The ultimate internet promise.
It's the hook that drags everyone in. Specifically, I've seen trends about buying royalty-free music catalogs or doing no-spend challenges to buy a house in 6 months. Let's look at the music one. The claim is you buy a catalog and just collect checks. But if you look at the data from music business worldwide, the average stream pays the rights holder somewhere between $0.003 and $0.005.
Fractions of a penny.
Exactly. To make even $1,000 a month, which is hardly a living wage, you need hundreds of thousands of streams. And buying the catalog involves complex intellectual property rights. This is not passive, it's a complex legal business. Yet it's sold as a hack anyone can do from their couch.
I'd come at it from a different angle with the no-spend challenge for housing. I think that one is even more insidious because it masquerades as discipline. I saw a video where someone claimed they saved a down payment in 6 months just by cutting discretionary spending.
Which implies that the only reason everyone else can't buy a home is because they're buying too many lattes.
Precisely. This is a classic case of survivorship bias. Let's actually run the numbers on this, because the math here is where the cruelty lies. A median home price in the US is around $400,000. A conservative 10% down payment is $40,000. To save that in 6 months, you need to save roughly $6,600 a month.
And the median U.S. earner takes home about $4,000 a month, total.
Exactly. So the math is literally impossible for the median earner, even if they spent $0 on food or rent. The video omits the privilege, usually a high income or living rent-free with parents, and it frames it as a discipline issue. This is where I completely agree with you that the content is harmful. It sets unrealistic expectations. When a normal person tries this and fails, they don't blame the math, they blame themselves. They feel like failures because they couldn't hack their way to wealth.
And that shame drives them further away from legitimate financial planning. It's a vicious cycle. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I think the distinction between our positions is becoming pretty clear. I see these trends as actively predatory or, at best, negligently false.
And I see them as a symptom of a system that hasn't made itself accessible, filling a vacuum with fast food advice because people are starving for direction.
So how do we navigate this? I mean, if you're a listener scrolling through your feed, how do you filter the signal from the noise? I would propose a rigorous 3-question fact check for any piece of financial content you consume. First, who benefits? Is the creator selling a course, an affiliate link, a crypto token? Check the bio. If they're monetizing the advice directly, be skeptical.
That's fair. Follow the money.
Second, does it account for risk? If someone tells you all about the upside without ever mentioning what happens if it goes wrong, like with the credit card emergency fund, it is not advice, it's a sales pitch. And third, is it one size fits all? Good finance is personal. Does the advice consider your debt, your income, your location? If it's a blanket statement like everyone should buy this coin, run the other way. Real financial health is, well, it's often boring. It requires accredited sources like certified financial planners or resources from investor.gov.
I agree with the checklist, I do. But I want to offer a slightly softer conclusion. We shouldn't demonize the curiosity that leads people to these videos in the first place. TikTok Finance, I think, should be viewed as an appetizer, not the main course. It sparks interest. It exposes people to concepts like compounding or budgeting, or just the idea that they can control their money. That has value.
But you can't live on appetizers. Eventually, you will starve.
No, you can't. But you might not walk into the restaurant at all without them. The key is having the discipline to recognize that a 60-second clip is not an education. It's a prompt. Take that spark of interest and then go to the main meal. The books, the peer-reviewed studies, the credible experts. Just don't let the algorithm be your financial advisor.
I think that's a fair synthesis. The medium changes, from newspapers to television to TikTok, but the principles of wealth remain constant. Time, discipline, and compound interest. They aren't viral, they aren't sexy, but they work.
And perhaps the biggest challenge of our time isn't finding new information, but filtering out the bad information.
Indeed. It's all about filtering the signal from the noise. Thank you for listening to the debate. We hope this conversation helps you scroll a little more wisely.
Until next time.